Today we are breaking down how great of a villain Quackity is. We're right in the middle of a series breaking down the villains of the Dream SMP with the goal to be able to name one single character as the greatest Dream SMP villain of all time. After looking at the list of all 40 plus characters to play on the Dream SMP, I've narrowed the list of villains down to 8, and Quackity is the 7th one we're looking at. This of course means that there are already 6 videos up that break down other villains of the Dream SMP, from Technoblade to Jack Manifold. If you haven't given them a look, make sure to watch them after you finish this. This has taken an insane amount of effort to make this series happen, watching all the way back through all sorts of Dream SMP breakdowns, different perspectives, in order to make the series as complete as possible. So please consider subscribing. A new video is coming out every few days from the previous, so make sure you get notified when they get released. As a quick refresher, in order to look at all the villains in a similar light, we are basing the way we grade them off an article written by Masterclass. In this article, it lists 5 points that make a great villain: a strong connection to the hero, a clear morality, a worthy opponent, compelling backstory, and that villains should be fun. Using this scale, we'll be able to accurately and fairly look at each villain so that when we list the greatest villain of all time, we will have an accurate scale of comparison. As always, if you don't understand any of the 5 points that we've listed, don't worry, because we're going to go ahead and break them all completely down by the end of this video. Alrighty, let's jump in. As you know by now, before we can start looking at the 5 points, we must establish the fact of whether or not Quackity is actually a villain. Now, this one is pretty obvious as to why. The manipulation, exploitation, torture, they really lend themselves to being a bad guy. And even moments where doing good was an option, but that choice was foregoed, also contribute.
Would realize this after I let you die at the Red Banquet.
What?
Wait.
Quackity is definitely one of the more confusing villains on the Dream SMP, but a villain nonetheless. So, now let's break it all down. The first point on our grading scale is the question of, does Quackity have a strong connection to the hero? This admittedly is probably his weakest point. In the case of Quackity, he's most often doing something evil against, well, no one really. He goes from place to place having conversations with people, but his villain more resembles a corrupted bounty hunter than anything else. The closest we get to Quackity having a hero against him is Dream, but that doesn't truly fit the bill. You see, Quackity's true connection with Dream started after Dream was already defeated. Quackity, in search of power, attempted to get the revive book through means of torture, but there wasn't really a connection. You have to recognize Quackity's story for what it is. Quackity isn't a villain fighting against a hero. He's a villain fighting for power against other villains. Now I'm going to jump out of order of our grading scale and go straight to backstory, but we need this in order to understand the rest. So Quackity is a villain whose conflict is with other villains. How do we get here? Well, let's start off with Quackity's first real entrance into Dream SMP lore: the election. Quackity, in search of power, pools his votes with Schlatts, another villain, in order to win. Just like every story ever where the villains team up, one villain eventually kicks the other out. In this case, it's Quackity who gets the boot. Quackity then joins L'Manberg to get back at Schlatts, eventually winning and forming an alliance with the allies that defeated his competition. It was Quackity who then decided to attack Techno, causing a spark that would lead to the destruction of the nation. From there, Quackity searched out every other villain who held power. In fact, he searched out everyone who even held a slightly questionable morality and attempted to gain power over them. He manipulates Sam into allowing him to torture Dream. He tortures Dream to try to get the revive book. He tricks Techno into going into the prison with the intent to make sure that the two most powerful people are locked away. He fights Bad Boy Halo and tries to destroy the egg when it's showing to be a greater influence than him. He creates his own city where he raises a slime boy, teaching him flawed lessons that, like many villain stories, end up with the apprentice killing the master and using the master's own logic. Quackity is a villain that fights other villains. When it comes to clear morality, it's confusing, but one aspect actually makes this a strong factor in Quackity's case as a villain. As I just mentioned, Quackity is a villain whose goal is to be more powerful than other villains. Now, this alone is a fairly weak morality. In the article by Masterclass, it says, make the reader understand exactly what the desperation or belief has driven him to do. This is where Quackity has developed well. You've heard Quackity many times over say that he's trying to make a world of peace, and that his actions are so that evil will be eradicated. Obviously, his actions don't match his words, but the basis for why he thinks that this is the right path is actually there. In one of Quackity's lore streams, he had a flashback that shows entirely where his morality comes from.
And if I have to become president and tear down some walls in order for no one to ever feel unwelcome again, then so be it. I do believe that everyone has a good side to them, and I do believe that everyone has something to contribute to the nation.
Your aspirations of optimism are not going to be subject to my nation's security, I'm afraid. I completely disagree with everything you've said.
I mean, agree to disagree, but that's not what I'm talking about.
You say everyone has a good side, Quackity, and you're right. You're right. Everyone has a good side. But that good side is only there to help themselves. If you want to really help people, you're going to need power, Quackity. You can make a movement, You can make a resistance, right? You can go out and you can come back and they'll give you a ticker tape parade. They'll cheer for you in the streets, but you will change nothing. If you have a revolution, everyone will hate you. You will sacrifice everything and you will lose everything you've ever had. But you'll come back and everything will be changed. And Quackity, if you want to change things, you're going to need power. That's what you want, really, isn't it? Look at me.
I mean...
And power isn't gained from diplomacy and bureaucracy and giant courthouses suspended in the sky, blah, blah, blah. It's gained from swords, Quackity. It's gained from blades. It's gained from steel, iron. Even if everyone has this good side that you're talking about, then anyone who wants to prove it has to show their dark side first. You're going to have to kill. You're going to have to torture. You're going to have to maim. When I look at you, as a fellow outsider, you're not ready for that. I'm leaving.
Oftentimes, I'm not a fan of retconning something in a story, but in this case, I like it a lot. Quackity's character is confusing, but when you look at what Wilbur said, how Wilbur explained his morality, all of Quackity's actions make sense. It even balances how Quackity says he's doing things for the betterment of people, and his actions are saying something different. There's a conflict inside of him between the morals he's created that he believes are right, and the morals he's adapted from Wilbur. The intertwining of both creates a complicated morality that is actually quite strong. But what about a worthy opponent? Well, it's not super great. The reason this is because the opponents of Quackity have goals that they're trying to achieve that aren't directed at it. Bad Boy Halo tries to spread the influence of the egg. It's not directed at Quackity, but the server as a whole. Sam is just a prison guard who is too nervous about letting Dream escape that he's prone to manipulation. Sam's focus is on Dream, not Quackity. Dream's counterpart is Tommy. Quackity is just there because Dream can't go anywhere away from him. Techno went to prison on account of Dream and then escaped. But when Techno came back to break Dream out, Quackity had nothing to do with that story. Quackity doesn't have a worthy opponent. In fact, Quackity doesn't even have someone who he could label as his arch nemesis. Quackity's real opponent is his own mind, his moral compass. But is Quackity fun? Yeah. No? Wait, I don't know. When Quackity comes on screen, do you sit up? Do you take note of what he's saying? Well, no, not really. You enjoy watching Quackity because of the literal presentation of his lore stream. He's incredibly talented in the area of cinematography, but as for a character, he's kind of flat when on screen. Yeah, when you break down his character, he becomes more interesting, but as I mentioned in another video about Dream SMP, Quackity the villain doesn't act like Quackity the person. The mismatch of character makes him really hard to actually buy into. That is Quackity. What do you think of Quackity as a villain? Is he good? Is he bad? Is he too complicated? Let me know what you guys think down below. If you haven't checked out the other videos in this series, go give them a look. We're almost at the point of being able to name the greatest villain on the Dream SMP, so make sure you watch all the other videos so that way you're up to date. Also, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I've put a buttload of work into making these videos happen, so it would mean the world if you'd slap that subscribe button. I'm releasing a video in this series every few days, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled, and I'll see you guys soon. Adios!